Hi, I'm Jack from Andertons Music, and this is Chris from Focusrite Novation. We're in amongst lots of Focusrite Novation gear. We've got a whole, everything here, and we've also got the new Novation bass station that's not even out yet. This is a prototype, yeah?
Well, this is one of our samples that we've got at the moment, and yeah, I mean we're working really hard to get it all up into ship shape. But yeah, this is definitely getting there now. So
super, yeah. And a little bit I heard sounds amazing, but I'm going to leave you to talk through the finer bits of it.
Cool.
So over to Chris.
Thanks a lot. Cool. So yeah, the Bass Station 2 is the reissue of the original Bass Station from Novation. Bass Station was actually released about 20 years ago, 1993. So it's really nice to have a revisit to the Bass Station Synth. But what we've done is we've taken the original idea of the analog bass station synthesizer and then added modern day capabilities on there. We're in 2013, so why not? And so effectively we have an analog synthesizer but with digital control. The synth itself has two distinct oscillators. Each of the oscillators has 4 different waveforms that you can use. We have sine wave, triangle, sawtooth, and square wave, and which also works with pulse width as well, with pulse width modulation. Both of those oscillators have the ability to choose between those waveforms, and then we also have a third sub-oscillator which is linked into oscillator 1. The sub-oscillator can either be an octave or 2 octaves below, and again we have a choice of 3 different waveforms that we can use for the sub. If we have a quick listen, this is this should be oscillator 1 with just a straightforward sawtooth. So we'll have a listen to some of the examples of the waveform. So this one is the square wave at the moment, but this also has pulse width, so we can actually manually change the pulse width. We can also apply an LFO amount to the pulse width as well. In addition to that, we can also use the modulation envelope. We have a modulation envelope section down here, again to affect the pulse width. Use all 3 of those at the same time to control that particular waveform. Alongside the waveform choice that we also have different octave ranges that we can use. So, and we have a coarse pitch control which gives us an octave either side. So, and a fine pitch control which again will give us a semitone either side. So we can use these obviously to tune up the oscillators and get a nice, really rich, thick sound. Alongside the coarse and fine pitch controls for each of the oscillators, we can also use modulation to control them as well. So for example, we have LFO1, which is dedicated to the oscillator section, and we can add a depth. We can then use the LFO to change the speed and the shape of the low frequency oscillation, which is controlling that. With the oscillators, we have 4 different waveforms. So we have a triangle, a sawtooth, a square wave, and we also have a sample and hold low frequency oscillator as well. Let's have a listen to some of those. So alongside the control for the speed with the low frequency oscillators, we also have a delay as well. If I use the switch on the LFO section here, I can actually increase the delay, and this will give us basically a period of time whilst that low frequency oscillator is opening right up. If we shorten that speed, we can get some nice effects as well. So we can use this to control, obviously, the low frequency oscillation. Alongside that, we also have a speed control. So if I use the switch here and flip down to speed, effectively turn the speed off, which will just stop the oscillator from running. And then if we increase that, well into the audio range with the LFO oscillator as well. So we can use this to get a nice sort of FM type of sound. Next to the oscillator section, we also have our mixer. This is a good place to go through this as well. So we'll just go back to the initialized patch. This is now just a sawtooth waveform. And this is oscillator 1. So if I just bring the volume down, obviously we don't get any sound. Bring the oscillator back up, and this time I'm going to grab the sub-oscillator. Again, as I mentioned earlier, we've got an octave below and 2 octaves below. Alongside being able to choose the octave, as I mentioned earlier, we also have 3 waveforms. So we have a sine wave, we have a narrow fixed pulse width, and also a square wave. So using a combination of both oscillators and the the sub-oscillator, we can get some nice, really rich, thick bass sounds. Now obviously it's the bass station 2, so you would expect to be able to get nice, rich, thick bass sounds, but also the bass station 2 is really capable for lead sounds and arpeggiated sounds too. So it's a really rich and broad palette of sounds that you can get out of this analog synth. Another section I talk about on the mixer. So if we bring down all the oscillators there, and we see that we have this control. Now this particular control has 3 different volume controls to it. So if I turn it up with the switch set to noise, we get a white noise generator. If I switch to ring modulator, we also have a ring modulator between oscillator 1 and 2. So again, now I can use obviously the pitch on the oscillators to get some. And alongside the ring modulator and the noise, this switch can also move up to where it says EXT or external. And using this now, I have an external input volume control. This is really, really nice feature because on the back of the actual synth we have an external input, and that external input is then fed through the analog filters and through the analog effects. This can be used to get all manner of different modulation effects from maybe a guitar, a vocal on a microphone, or a sampler, or something along those lines, and it can be really used to great effect. So, this, as I mentioned, has 3 different states, this particular encoder. But one thing I should mention is that all of the encoders on the base station will also put out CC message. So you could actually use this as a controller keyboard for your DAW software. One of the really nice features on it though is the fact that we have one encoder here that has a switch between 3 different states. That means that we effectively have 3 encoders here that will send out different CC messages, which can be really useful. So alongside being a fantastic sounding analog synth, of course we've got a lot of deep level control that you can use with your DAW. So onto the filter section, and the base station 2 has 2 different types of filters. We have the classic filter, which is modelled on the original base station, and this is a variable state filter. So basically, we can treat it as a low pass filter. We also can switch that to band pass, and we also have a high pass as well. Another really nice thing on the filter side of things is that we can actually get them to self-oscillate as well. So, now if we start to use modulation envelope and LFOs with this as well, we can get some nice effects. For example, we could maybe create a bass drum sound or something like that. So I'm just going to go to my envelope section down at the bottom here. So get some nice chunky bass drum sounds out of just using the filter on its own. I mentioned earlier we've also got LFO as well. So we can use that again to modulate the filter. So alongside the classic base station filter, we've also used the acid filter. And the acid filter is a new design, but it is based on a classic ladder diode filter. And this is really to give you those sorts of acidy bass sounds. So using the filter and a combination of the effects, such as the distortion as well, we can achieve some really nice chunky acid sounds. So there we have two distinct different filters that we can use. Now alongside the filter side of things as well, we also have two effects sections. One thing I should say is that we have an overdrive that can feed into the filter, which is nice to give it a nice bit of gain and get some really nice sick sounds out of the filter. But after the filter we also have a distortion. So the distortion will add a load of harmonic content to it and really make it a nice gnarly sound. Now alongside that as well, we also have oscillator filter modulation. Now this is basically taking the oscillator from Oscillator 2 and then using it to control the filter. So this is like an FM type of control for the sound. So let's have So now if I start to play around with Oscillator 2's coarse pitch, we'll start to hear the effect. So you get a nice, really rich analog sound out of that. So we have the effects section. Moving over, we have the envelopes as well. We have two envelopes. We have an amplifier envelope or amplitude envelope and a modulation envelope. The amp envelope controls the volume and the shape of the sound. The mod envelope can be sent to a number of different destinations, such as pulse width and also to the filter as well. We can also use modulation envelope to control the pitch of the oscillators. On the switch here we have three different stages for it, so we can either just choose the amplitude envelope, we can either just choose the modulation envelope, or we can switch down and control both at once. And again with the CC controller message, that either sends out one CC message, another CC message, or really cleverly both of them together. So it's almost like having a little macro control just here. The LFO section, which we looked at, has a number of different additional features. Obviously we have speed and delay and waveform choice here, but along the keyboard we also have additional functionality. Now on the, for example LFO2, let's just get LFO2 running the filter. Okay, so now LFO2 is controlling the filter. And we're using a square wave, so we're getting a very straightforward on or off sound with the filter. But we've got a thing on the base station called slew, and we can use this to effectively round off the edges of that waveform. So by pressing the function button and the appropriate key on the keyboard, so LFO slew here, okay, and turning a value, let's have a listen to what that does to the sound. So effectively we can kind of customize the low frequency oscillation waveforms. Other things on the LFOs is that we have speed and sync. We can either have the LFO free running from its own engine here if you like, or we can sync it to the tempo. Now the base station can take tempo from either its internal tempo clock here, or if it receives an external clock signal fed into the base station, it will latch onto that. When we turn on the speed sync, we actually get cryptic messages telling us about the speed. So I'll just turn this on. Now we'll see that I have, for example, 32 triplets, 32 straightforward notes, 16th triplets, 8 triplets, 16th dotted notes, and so on and so forth. So there's a whole variety there. Also with the LFO, we can either lock it so that it will trigger every time you strike a key, or we can have it free running in the background. On the far side here we have our Arpeggiator section and a fantastic step sequencer as well. Arpeggiator is very straightforward. If I hold down a chord, it will play that up and down for me. I can latch this on and off. And I also have a choice of up to 32 different rhythms that I can apply to that arpeggiator. So we've got a lot of different variation that we can apply just to the arpeggiator alone. I've got standard functions such as up, down, up and down 2, which will repeat the first and the last note. I also have played, which is a really nice way of putting in your own little sequences, so it will play back in the order of the notes that I played in. Again, I can apply the rhythms to this. We have random, which is just going to play all the notes in a random order, but then we get to the step sequencer, and the step sequencer is really well configured. If I switch to record here, effectively I now have 4 separate slots that I can store my sequences into. So if I move to, for example, step number 3 here, I'm in record, I'm flashing lights here so I know I'm in record mode, and I can then just tap in the notes I want. Okay, so we've tapped that in, it's 32 steps. Go to play now, turn the arpeggiator on, and now. So this is a great way of being able to store in different sequences. If I move to a different one, I stored something earlier here. We can use all these 4 steps, different sequences there, and move through those to create a bit of a performance. If I want to get a bit more deep with the sequence, I can use the legato and the rest function. So if I go to record again, press a note, and press legato, press a note, press legato, I've actually tied those 3 notes together. If I want to employ a rest then, so I put rest in, maybe another rest, and then another note or 2. Okay, this is a 12-step sequence now. I go to play and then press a note to trigger it. You'll notice that that's repeating the steps there as well. We have different trigger modes. This is currently set to multi. If I put this to single, so now it's just going to play that sustained note for me. So you can see we've got all the main controls for the synth, all the things that we would want to tweak and get instant hands-on sound shaping with, are all on the top panel. But alongside that, as we've seen with some of the other features as well, we also have a deep level of control from the keyboard itself. As a point, the keyboard is it's an individually sprung keyboard. So effectively that gives us a really nice old school synth feel. But as I mentioned before, we've got different functions on the actual keyboard itself. We looked at the LFO stuff earlier, but we also have the ability to apply aftertouch to our sounds. I'm just going to dial in a preset here, and if you have a listen, by pressing down the key, I'm able to open up the filter and actually increase the LFO speed as well. This can be really useful for performance-based stuff. Effectively, we have 3 different things that we can assign to aftertouch, and we can do this in varying amounts. For example, I can apply filter frequency by just pressing function and this key here, and now I can use the value controls to change the amount I'm going to change the filter frequency by using aftertouch. We have LFO to oscillator pitch, so LFO1 controlling the oscillator pitch. We also have LFO2 speed. So alongside the aftertouch, we also have a modulation wheel, and again we can apply 3 different destinations to the modulation wheel, and actually use that again to give us additional performance while we're playing. Further up the keyboard, we've got things, for example, like velocity on the keyboard itself. Obviously the synth isn't a velocity sensitive synth, it's an analog synth, so it wouldn't be. However, we can use the velocity on the keyboard to modulate and control aspects such as the envelopes. Alongside this, I just want to quickly demonstrate this as well. We have a sync for oscillators 1 and 2. This can give you another really rich palette to base your sounds on. So this is our standard waveform. So I'm going to bring down the volume of oscillator 1 and bring up the volume of oscillator 2. Identical because it's the same sort of waveform. If I now press function and oscillator sync and turn this on, now we're effectively going to be listening, well we've taken oscillator 1 as the master and oscillator 2 as the slave. And effectively we're listening to oscillator 1 out of this output. But if I start to control again the pitch from oscillator 2, sound as well. So again, it's another way of getting even more sounds out of the bass station. Further down the keyboard we have things like swing, which we can apply to our arpeggio patterns as well to give it a nice swung feel. We've also put a limiter on here just in case you're getting a bit too gnarly perhaps with the oscillator, filter modulation and the distortion. And at the top end here we have global controls, things such as MIDI channel, local on and off as well. And we also have dump and dump all, which will allow you to use a sysx manager to actually save and store patches.
I'm jumping back in. I've been stood off camera watching Chris do that whole run through the keyboard, and I think it was really important that we did it because it's an analog synth at the end of the day. We haven't got any videos like that up like that. That are really that comprehensive. So hopefully you can see all the things you can do with it. I was really shocked by step sequencer.
Yeah, cool.
That blew my face off.
Nice, yeah.
Different types of filter. Also the fact that these are, everything seems to be thought of. Like all the little shortcomings that I personally look for in a synth that sometimes in around this price range, sometimes they won't have aftertouch. It's got aftertouch. They won't send CC values. Even the fact you said you thought of, will they send CC, or maybe you've got a multi-mode one here. I mean, I'll go back and probably watch the video and learn all the bits about it, so that if you come into the store I can show you the bits that you went through there, because it was so in-depth.
Nice.
I just want to look at it as a layman, because I am a layman, and I just want to have a little feel. Is that alright? Can I have a feel of
Feel
your
free. You feel free to be a layman and feel
I'm just
the bass station 2's knobs. Oh,
by
the way, one thing on the knobs, I should say this as well, you know, there's so much in there, but you can feel, well, you can hear actually when you're using things like the filter and all the other different encoders in there, but they're really smooth. There's no real kind of stepping that's obvious, and that's because we're using.
This isn't. he isn't lying. I'm going to be pretty objective here.
But it's about the sound, and basically we've used an 8-bit MIDI system there, so we've got a high resolution MIDI
Love
on
that.
there. So
Stop talking dirty to me.
Cool.
This is really
well,
good.
have fun anyway, Jack. See what you think.
No. Say, I want you to just go.
Okay.
Don't go away.
Edit that bit out there.
no. Hey, I'm going to say, I'm just going to do some pressing. I'm going to do some. There's another guy who loves. I've seen his videos. He does a lot of pressing.
Yeah.
It's really robust, even though this isn't like. Retail one. This is still
this is a pre-production model. So.
Everything's super tight on it. I couldn't believe all the features it had in there. And you are right. Annoyingly, you are. These are super sturdy. These are not going in at all. These are really sturdy knobs because you're going to be twiddling them.
Yeah, a lot.
Quite a lot.
Yeah, exactly.
No, do it. Right. Okay. And what I like is patch 0. This is just an initial patch.
Again, another thing, Jack, is that there'll be 128 patches in there. It'll come with 64 presets.
Yeah.
But there'll be slots for another 64, or you could populate the whole thing with 128 of your own.
Sweet.
And
that's really cool, because the old one, if you were thinking, oh well, this turned you on, you thought there's an old one, they're not like super, probably as famous as like Moogs or things like that, or MS-20s. On the old one, on the keyboard version, you couldn't store patches anyway. So this is the, if you're thinking maybe old or new, like I was, like when I looked into it, I looked into the old ones, researched it. This new one really has so many things that are of now that would be very useful, let alone just saving the patch. You've got a gig every time. Like, I don't want to do that.
That's it. I mean, you know, on other synths, on other analog synths, you might just have to, you know, every time you turn it on, you've got to start from where you are on the actual encoders and whatnot. But here
and you just might not be sober enough for that. Okay, I'm just gonna. I'm just gonna change the pitch bend. I just want to have a little play.
Yeah.
Right, okay, so that's pretty lead. Let's throw it down a bit. I mean, it's pretty fat. I'm going to crank it up a bit. And that's just a saw wave, isn't it?
This is just the initial sawtooth.
It's fat.
If you need some sub on there as well.
Oh, bring me in some sub.
Probably a bit too low for the.
Oh. Okay, I want to say that I've got a lot of friends who we just normal gigs because I'm not the biggest synth twiddler, but I have loads of friends who are getting into, maybe they play bass, maybe they play guitar. And you want a little keyboard, and we do a lot of small keyboards now in the store. I think what this sets apart for me is that it is analog. You can hear it. I'm gonna say that you can hear how fat it is. Okay, thanks Chris for coming in today.
You're all welcome.
Sorry if that looks a bit fake, but I really mean it. It was really good to watch you go through all of it, and I think it's really important to think here in the store for us who work here and for people buying. I think this is actually the most comprehensive mini synth, let alone for the fact it's analog as well, that we're going to be selling. We're going to be selling this hopefully from the end of June.
That's it. We're hoping to get it out into stores around about that sort of time, end of June.
And it's going to be £399.
£399. Yep.
Pretty good deal. It sounds fantastic. So, is there any way this doesn't have a demo button, does it?
It doesn't have a specific demo button on there at the moment.
Okay, but with the sequencer. So if I go to record and then I just put some stuff in. Sorry about this, it's just a thing I like to do.
Okay,
these things.
Cool.
And then I'm going to go to play.
Turn it on.
I'll turn it on. And I latch it. It's kind of like a demo button now.
There you go. It's got its own demo button.
Come, we'll go together.
Come on.
Yeah.